So, today, we're going to dive into the story of a small, rural school district that suddenly found itself in a pretty big and not so flattering spotlight. It's one of those stories that really shows you how seemingly minor issues can snowball into huge problems for an entire town. Let's get right into it.
It's a really good question, right? For the Topock Elementary School District in Arizona, the answer came crashing down in the form of a state audit that, well, uncovered a whole mess of serious problems.
All right, so our story really kicks off with the finding. This is the official report that started it all and would end up having some pretty serious consequences.
So what set all this in motion? It was an audit from the Arizona Auditor General's office, and it found significant deficiencies, which, is basically government speak for things are really, really wrong here.
This is the question on everyone's mind, isn't it? An audit finding deficiencies sounds so clinical. It can sound a little vague. But once you start to dig into the details, hoo boy, a much clearer and frankly more worrying picture starts to form.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What did the auditors actually find? We're going to start with some pretty critical failures and how the whole place was being governed and managed.
Right off the bat, you can see some huge leadership problems. The board violated open meeting law, which is a massive deal for transparency, making sure the public actually knows what's going on. They tried to go back and approve old payments. And get this, they didn't even have written contracts for their top 2 administrators. I mean, all of this just screams a total breakdown in the most basic procedures and accountability.
And believe it or not, the problems didn't stop there. The audit also found some really serious issues with how they were handling money and technology. They weren't properly tracking expensive stuff, things that cost over $1,000. And on the tech side, no records for IT changes, and maybe worse of all, no yearly security training for staff. In this day and age, that is just a massive risk for any organization, let alone a school handling sensitive student data.
Now, you might be thinking, wow, how did things get so bad so fast? Well, the thing is, they didn't. This was not some surprise bombshell. If you look back at the district's own meeting minutes from the year before the audit, you can see the warning signs were flashing bright red.
You can just see the pressure building and building for months. Way back in January 2024, the board knew the state thought they were in dire straits. Then, they tried these clumsy fixes for past mistakes. By April, the state was threatening to hold back their funding. And by May, the state actually did it. They cut the funding. The writing was on the wall, in big, bold letters.
And if you're wondering just how long this mess had been going on, well, listen to this. In what has to be one of the most candid moments you'll ever hear from an official, the superintendent himself said this during a board meeting. Wow. I mean, that's a shocking thing to admit out loud. It really paints a picture of a system that's been deeply dysfunctional for a very, very long time.
Okay, so you have all this chaos happening inside the district. It was really only a matter of time before it spilled out and started affecting the actual community. And the fallout from all this mismanagement was about to hit taxpayers right where it hurts, their wallets.
So, the district's finances are a mess. The state has cut off some of their funding. They're in a real bind. What was their big idea to solve it? A huge, and I mean huge, property tax hike for everyone living there. And when I say huge, I am not kidding. We are talking about a nearly 10 times increase. Imagine this. If you owned a home with an assessed value of $100,000, your school tax bill would jump from about $13 to over $130. That is a staggering jump for any family to suddenly have to deal with. And you better believe the community connected the dots, and fast. People like this resident, Bill Ainsworth, they saw a straight line from all those ongoing issues the Auditor General found right to this new bill they were all being expected to pay.
All right, so what's the big lesson here? Let's zoom out for a second and talk about the real takeaway and why a story about one tiny school district actually matters to all of us.
When you lay it all out, you can see this perfect, disastrous chain reaction. It all starts with those internal failures, right? Years of just not doing things by the book. That, of course, gets the state's attention. Then comes the financial squeeze, which leads them to propose that crazy tax hike. And boom, that's when you get the public outcry, because people are now seeing the direct impact on their own lives. It's such a clear example of how what happens in a school board meeting, it doesn't just stay in that room. All these seemingly small procedural missteps, not having a contract or writing a clear agenda, they can snowball into very real, very large consequences for the taxpayers who are footing the bill. It's a powerful lesson in why public accountability is so important. And that really leaves us with this one big, lingering question. In this case, in Topock, it was the State Auditor General who was watching. But this whole story is a pretty stark reminder for small towns and districts everywhere about how crucial oversight and transparency really are, and about the importance of always asking that tough question. Who exactly is watching the watchers?